In this country, it is somewhat of an invisible issue, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and that doesn't mean it isn't someone's daughter. It isn't someone's sister.
All you want to do is give them a hug and make them feel like it's okay. And you feel like you can't even give them a hug because that's the exact thing that stole a piece of their innocence away.
People are posted and sold online multiple times a day. As far as the ad that was posted up, there was a girl who eerily looked like me. That was the picture they put up there for me on the ad. Just how you can go find a car, it was a picture and a description and a price.
Microsoft and Facebook and Twitter and Google are competing every day in business, but they've all agreed to work together to find a solution to human trafficking and exploitation of children.
I would very much like to preface now that if you are at all involved in the foster care system, whether you're a foster parent, a foster child, what may it be, I do not want you to feel whatsoever unsafe. This is a very small statistic, and if you are having a good experience in the foster care system, then that is great, and you do not have to worry about the stuff I'm talking about. Because the reality of the situation is, most foster parents are Jesus. They are extremely important. We need more of them. Also, trigger warning, I'm going to be talking about details of child abuse. So where are all of the children who magically disappeared? They didn't find their bodies, they disappeared. How are you supposed to trust the world if when you were 4 years old, all you knew was weird, disgusting humans who have weird problems? You're a caseworker and you take a child in from an abusive situation. It's a done deal. Everything is better now, except for, what about the foster care system? This person has no one else to take care of them. It's better than where they came from, right? Make sure to comment below your thoughts on this. Did you already know this and it's just like making you really angry, or you didn't know this and you're like shocked? Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, turn the bell on if you're feeling risky, and comment below because it makes the algorithm be like, okay, I guess I will push this video. Enjoy the video. So DCF or DCFS are the social workers who showed up at your house when someone filed a complaint about your parent hitting you in public. It stands for Child Protective Services, and it is government agencies in the USA that is responsible for providing child protection, which includes responding to the reports of child abuse or neglect. If they find that the child is not in suitable conditions, then they will be taken into custody, given to another parent, and sometimes given to a foster parent temporarily or permanently, in which they would be adopted.
When their families fail to care for them, it's the job of DCFS to step in.
I'm with the Department of Children and Family Services Hotline. How you doing?
The Child Abuse Hotline receives as many as 1,000 calls a day. And when there is a substantial threat of danger, it's a social worker who drives out to investigate. So what do we know about this case?
A mother was spotted at a restaurant under the influence of some type of substance and was driving with her 10-month-old child.
DCFS is really important because if they fail to submit the correct report, children can have the worst consequences, such as being by their parents.
Graphic new details tonight in the death of an 8-year-old Palmdale boy.
Despite many complaints and hotline calls, the case got precious little attention from the Department of Children and Family Services.
8-year-old Gabriel Fernandez died, allegedly, at the hands of his own mother and her boyfriend. DCFS had received multiple reports that the child was being abused, but somehow Gabriel was never removed from his home.
In the foster care system, it's oftentimes that children will be separated from their siblings. There was one situation where this father didn't want the social worker to see the beatings on his son, so he lit him on fire, and obviously then he got taken into custody. Where do missing children go?
Children that were 6 and 7 years old were being molested for money.
And then came the internet. And with the internet, the problem exploded.
Because of the communication that exists, because of technology and the internet, you meet a stranger that has a similar interest to you, and next thing you know, you're sharing content around that particular interest. Well, that might happen with cars, and that might happen with hobbies, but it also happens with child pornography and human trafficking of underage children.
The name thorn itself has a beautiful connotation. Thorns protect the rose. And the rose here are our children and their futures.
Is basically a organization, foundation, charity that helps to find the missing children online, because 63% of children who have been trafficked were actually advertised online.
In 2004, when the National Center was receiving reports of potential child pornography, the volume was approximately 450,000 files. Recently, that number has expanded, and we've now received over 17 million.
The age of children is becoming increasingly younger, and it's more and more likely that individuals have not only child pornography, but child pornography with violent themes.
The offenders in these kinds of crimes do not match society's stereotype. These are people who are part of our community.
We're already seeing examples of getting people out of modern day slavery.
So it's then that they're able to like invent this different stuff. But anyways, on their website they have different analytics, and it's really scary. 91% of girls who are African American or Latino are more likely to be a victim of child sex trafficking. Child welfare involvement. Studies consistently report that 50 to 90% of child sex trafficking victims have been involved in the child welfare system. Instability creates opportunities for the traffickers to reach out and bond with the vulnerable children. These relationships are then used against the children to initiate sexual activity. And a lot of the times a foster parent will literally sell the child for a large profit, and they went missing, I guess. They ran away, which is also not uncommon for sex trafficking. So we're just gonna ignore all of the children in foster care who have just slipped into sex trafficking.
We have to stay on the front cutting edge of that technology, because the criminals, they're on the front cutting edge.
And they create international and global networks of pedophiles sharing images of the people that they abuse.
A lot of these networks are actually moving this kind of content and actually moving human beings for money.
Pimps and traffickers no longer have to just, work the street. They can just place an ad and sit back and have their customers come to them wherever they might be.
The different types of trafficking, unfortunately, are labor trafficking, which is basically when a person is subjected to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. If you don't really understand, basically some examples are agricultural or domestic service workers, traveling sales crews that force children to sell legal items such as magazines, or illegal items such as drugs. Kids are like on Breaking Bad. Kids are used for scary things, such as like how women are used to do scary things, because they seem more innocent. So like a child will be used to shoot someone because it'll be the last thing they see coming, and people will literally adopt children out of this. So L. Ron Hubbard, the Scientology guy, actually wanted to adopt kids so that he could use them for his labor camps. Always learning fun stuff on my channel. Sex trafficking, adults would probably perform commercial sex by force, fraud, or coercion. By law, children under the age of 18 who are induced to engage in a commercial sex act are considered victims of sex trafficking. I was listening to this one story on I'm a Killer, and his father literally traded him for like a bottle of wine or like moonshine to have for another guy to have his way with him. Examples of sex trafficking include a minor engaging survival i.e. the victim engages in sex in order to obtain basic needs such as food, shelter, or clothing, which are considered something of value, or participating in some sort of pornography. That is also sex trafficking. When you think of trafficking, obviously you think of physically moving, but in these cases, a lot of the times you don't even have to move. Professionals in the child welfare system usually use the word victim or survivor, but in the court system we usually use the word victim because of terms for their eligibility for services, legal standing, and rights, whereas the term survivor is frequently used to connotate the strength and resilience of individuals who are exploited through human trafficking. Victims of child trafficking can be either from the country or not from the country that you are in. The exact number of child victims of human trafficking in the United States is unknown, and trying to determine the number is difficult. The number of exploited children at risk for exploitation varies widely from source to source, often due to differences of definition and methodology. Challenges to data collection include victims of trafficking not self-identifying due to factors such as complex trauma, trauma bonds, and normalization of victimization. A trauma-bonded relationship is the attachment of an abused person who feels for their abuser, specifically in a relationship with a cyclical pattern of abuse. The bond is created due to a cycle of abuse and positive reinforcement. Victims or survivors of this often feel guilty or for some reason scared to go to someone. They might have a fear of talking to the authorities. They have no trust for service providers, which makes sense because how are you supposed to trust the world if when you were 4 years old all you knew was weird, disgusting humans who have weird problems? Like in Scientology, victims may, and often do, fear going to the authorities. They have no trust for service providers, and often they have been coached by their traffickers on what to say when they are talking to others. And when you're a child and you are told to keep something a secret, it's really difficult for these people to ever speak up because the person will say, like, don't tell because X, like, don't tell because I'll hurt our family or something. The person will grow up and then they'll finally realize that that was like, why was I so afraid? But it's really a brainwashing thing because when you're so young, you're prone to believe people that you trust. All of these things make it difficult for the screening for trafficker victims or collecting data to recognize victims difficult. Also, people not believing you. Like, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is a resource that is supported by the Administration for Children and Families within the U.S. Department of Health and Family Services, received reports from 5,544 potential cases of human trafficking in 2015, with 1,621 unfortunately pertaining to minors. For all cases, 75% involved sex trafficking, 13 involved labor trafficking, and 3% involved both types. 1 in 6 of more than 18,500 children reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 2017 as missing were actually the victims of trafficking. And it's sad a lot of the time because people don't know where their child went. Like, literally, their child will disappear into thin air. They don't know, like, and that's the really sad thing about, like, cold cases, is, like, you don't know if the person died right away or if they are still living in a horrible way. And good going, guys. Like, leave a note or something. Like, estimating the number of trafficking victims who were or are involved with child welfare faces similar challenges to determining the overall number of victims, but many studies have shown a strong connotation. Several studies show that 50 to 90% of children who were victimized of sex trafficking have been involved with a child welfare service. The children often had a background of severe trauma in the form of abuse, etc. Traffickers target children in foster care because of their increased vulnerability. Traffickers exploit the fact that children in a foster care system, in foster care, or those who have run away from care, may not be having their familial, emotional, or basic needs met. The traffickers promise to meet those needs, at times employing psychological manipulation and financial incentives to woo them, and use violence, drugs, or physical control, retain, and exploit them. Recent federal legislation has established mandates for states to collect additional data about children involved with child welfare who are known or suspected victims of sex trafficking. This relates to foster care because of the statistic that foster children unfortunately have a danger of being exploited more. However, there are a lot of stories of where the children would have been if they were not in foster care, and they do seem like the good potential to have the child in different housing situations. So this girl drove with her daughter when she was under the influence of multiple drugs because people reported her when she was at a restaurant with her child.
They decided to take me to jail. Mother apparently had a bag full of different medications.
Shannon's child is now in the hands of the Los Angeles Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS. Do you think that you deserve to have your daughter taken away from you?
Yeah. With that said, I do think that I deserve another chance, though.
This is baby Lily. She's 10 months old. Her mother is inside, still detained, and still under the influence. From the moment DCFS comes into contact with the child, they are responsible for them, whether they go to live with a relative, enter foster care, or return home. And until DCFS is certain that there is a relative both fit and willing to care for Lily, she'll remain with the county.
Nowadays, if there's an emergency and there's absolutely nowhere for the child to go, they are sent here.
The Welcome Center is where children ages 12 and younger are brought while they await placement in foster care.
We're here.
Like baby Lily, every child here is in limbo, caught between a life they knew and a future that is uncertain. And tonight, there are 8 other children over the age of 12 waiting at Command Post, a converted office building and a place of last resort. For the last 3 years, the number of kids entering the system has been on the rise, while the number of foster homes has gone down. And finding suitable placements is becoming increasingly more difficult.
In situations like this, it's really tricky because it is so important for these children to find loving parents. However, when there's 2 of them, it's harder.
But in one case, the news is heartbreaking for 2 siblings trying to stay together.
Okay, so say goodbye to your sister. Let me get his phone number for you, okay? Let me get his phone number. I'll get his phone. Okay, but you gotta be strong, your brother needs you to be strong, okay?
Basically what happened was the younger brother was placed and the older sister actually has to stay there.
If we're separating siblings, we try to do it as quickly as possible because it prolongs the pain. We found a placement for him, we haven't found one for her. Part of the reason we had her here is so they could stay together and work on that type of placement. Sometimes it happens, most times it doesn't.
Come on, I'm gonna go with Mr. Gray. I'll show you. Don't lose your number. Yeah, you will. No sooner than that. Come on. You got some stuff? Did you come with some stuff? No? All right, let's find out.
In a perfect world, there would be a home with 2 beds for 2 siblings. But it's not a perfect world, and it's far from a perfect system.
It is extremely important for a social worker to do their job properly and take a child into custody even if you think that there might be a problem, because I feel like they have a lot of empathy. They see these children and the dad is like, oh, I'm sober now, and they're like, okay, I'll give this one more shot, but it's better for the child to be sad for a little bit than the child to be dead. And I mean a little bit because if the father in question is innocent, then the child would just go back.
I'm about to meet the latest in a long line of DCFS directors, a man who is now grappling with the fallout of tragedy, Philip Browning.
There appeared to be just a lack of common sense in some of the decision-making by our workers, where there would be child fatality reports, where I'm thinking, how in the world could this worker have missed this? But I think sometimes we've tried so hard to ensure that the child stay with their home that we've had more situations that were adverse than we would like.
Gabriel wasn't the only child to die on the county's watch. A report conducted by a Children's Special Investigation Unit showed systemic failures that contributed to the deaths of 14 children in less than 2 years, and that an emphasis on keeping families together had let too many children slip through the cracks.
This is another story that I found interesting. I think it's very upsetting and extremely pretentious of me to assume that the police officers would come when you call them, but obviously that's a luxury that I did not realize I had. So I do have a lot of empathy for this lady, you know? Because her ex-husband literally took her child out of school and took her to a park because he thought, okay, this is the only way I can get her to fucking talk to me.
He felt the only way that he could get me to communicate with him was to go to the school and take my child. That's how he lured me to the park.
Monica panicked. Her 6-year-old daughter was in the hands of someone she knew to be dangerous.
I called the police. They didn't show.
Frustrated and afraid for her child, Monica then did something she now deeply regrets.
I took a gun and I went to the park. I was afraid of him. I just thought, I can't allow him to kidnap or hurt her or me. He didn't take me serious. I wind up firing a shot in the air. I was arrested and my children were taken into custody that day.
The mother, who was struggling to stay sober, had permission to see her daughter under supervised visits.
Under supervision, mother and daughter will have 2 hours together. While they reconnect, their social worker, Katrina, will take note of Shannon's behavior, looking to see if she shows up sober and on time. At 10 minutes past the hour, 10 minutes past the start of Shannon's scheduled visit with Lily, Katrina is starting to get worried.
Children belong with families, not with DCFS. Social workers try to do everything we can to keep families intact, but that isn't always the case, unfortunately.
A half hour later, Katrina and Lily are still waiting.
It's difficult for everyone. Social worker, the child, the parent. I'm sure Mom wanted to see her, but for whatever reason, she wasn't able to make it. Hey, Mom didn't show up for her visit, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. And foster parents are ready. Okay, thanks.
Bye. Come on.
We learn later that Shannon had relapsed.
Make sure to comment below your thoughts on this. Did you already know this and it's just like making you really angry, or you didn't know this and you're like shocked? Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, turn the bell on if you're feeling risky, and comment below because it makes the algorithm be like, okay, I guess I will push this video. Thank you so much for watching this video, and goodbye.